Entropy, apparently, I'm no physicist, is from the second law of thermodynamics by Newton. And in one article from Forbes magazine, where I get my physicist information, not really, but here's, I think, a good armchair definition. It says that entropy, a measure of disorder in the universe, must always increase in any closed system. It's a law that you're all familiar with. You can't get more out than's put in. And where do you get what's put in? And really, that's kind of an idea about life, is that life is such that if you're in a closed system, you got to get your power from somewhere. And where does it come from? Well, many people will say our power here on Earth comes from the sun, that the sun is the source of our power, but that the sun is dying. And so as the sun system releases its power, we get power, but still it's a diminishing return. There isn't more, there's less. I wonder if you feel that's the way it is from your life, because the truth is, whether it's emotional or physical or mental energy, you've got to get it from somewhere. Somewhere the work has to have been done for you to increase. And in fact, ultimately, it has to decrease from somewhere. Maybe that's not true with ideas, but maybe it is true with ideas. It's hard to know, especially when we're talking about chaos and disorder. But ultimately, the power you have comes from something else. You are, in a sense, a parasite. You're living off the power of the sun or a plant or an animal or somebody else. Now, that's a scary idea in some systems. And if you've ever played one of those rudimentary games about life and evolution, you'll know, like with lemmings or rats or other things, that there's a population balance. And that if the rats or lemmings get too many, then the environment can't sustain them. So you'll have a peak of population followed by a valley of population, because there has to be an equilibrium between the consumers and the providers. Now, your life has a lot of consumption. You consume energy, calories, to keep your body going, and a lot of other things. But the question is, do you live in a closed system? Because if you live in a closed system, that means that effectively you're a parasite, and not everybody can have an equal share of the pie. You will be taking from a diminishing return of another person or place or thing. And you will use it, and you will give back less. That's the second law of thermodynamics in the physical world. But I wonder if it applies to other areas, and I wonder if that's what Jesus was referring to when in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 and 20, he says the following. Jesus says, and now I'm reading from the Message, it's Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, but I think it summarizes it like I get my physicist information from Forbes magazine. Maybe I might get some of my theology from a paraphrase by one guy called Eugene Peterson, but not always. But in this case, see if it fits. Don't hoard treasure down here, where it gets eaten by moths, corroded by rust, or worse, stolen by burglars. Stockpile treasure in heaven, where it's safe from moth and rust and burglars. It's obvious, isn't it? I like Eugene's paraphrase. So we got these three domains, and I find it really interesting. It doesn't really matter which version of the Bible you're using, you're going to hit these three areas. You're going to hit the area of moths, rust, and burglars. Well, entropy fits into these ideas really well. Moths are that biological systems, not human. We're not talking about the volitional thing that animals are thinking about how to get you, that the ants are trying to invade your house. But there's this idea that nature is going to get its own. It's going to get what it needs to keep going. And it's going to get it from you because you took it from it. It has to. It's not a volitional, it's not a causal thing that it has this attitude but it's going to happen. Moths eat clothes or cloth or whatever. Something will rot, skimmel, mildew, mold. Living organisms have to feed on something. And for the most part, they have to feed on organic matter. That means life begets life, that life feeds on life. I sometimes wonder if our children, or our teenagers did, suck the life right out of us so that they could get a boost in life. What did we give of ourselves? But you have this physical world that's eating you up, as it were. It's trying to get at you. It needs your energy, or at least the things you've stored up, put away in barns and closets and so on. You don't mow your lawn, you don't clean your house. Nature will take it back over. You've got to fight for your right to party, because if you don't, nature's going to take it back over. Moths. But rust isn't like creatures. Rust is not a living organism. But I think that's the second idea, that there's the living world that's out to get you, as it were, or at least it's going to be parasitic like you are. It's going to find its energy somewhere. It doesn't care if it's your energy, what you've stored up, what you've laid aside. It's got to get it from somewhere. But then there's rust. Rust is just a chemical process. It's just something in the physical world. But it's part of that entropy. It's part of that things winding down, energy. You shine it, you make it, you take the elements and do something with them, but you got to maintain them, or they're going to half-life like uranium and everything else in this world. You see, it's not just the living organisms that are feeding off each other. It's the non-living, the stuff, the chemical, the physical elements of this world are disintegrating. They're not building up. They're falling apart. Second law of thermodynamics. It's the entropy thing. And Jesus is warning you, if you stay in this closed system, I hope you stayed in this video to make it to this point. If you stay in this closed system, you will have diminishing returns. If you stay with your wealth and your life in this closed system, you'll have diminishing returns. Now, Elon Musk is trying to get us to Mars, and he thinks that he's going to expand the closed system to use the resources from other places and expand the closed system. But the fact is, it's still part of the closed system. You've got to get out of this realm if you're going to save anything up and get a bigger piece of the pie. Now, that third element I find amazing. You know, with Darwinianism, it was applied in many ways throughout history to social constructs. And so you have this evolutionary theory that really was a biological theory that became a sociological theory. There's probably no actual causal link there, but in the 18th century, in 19th century, there was a lot of thought around sociological Darwinian implications. Whether or not you buy into that or not, I think Jesus had quite an insight, because he talks about the organic kingdom, he talks about the chemical or physical kingdom, but then he says thieves break in and steal. Sociological implications to entropy. And that's the truth. We try to build society up. We try to do everything we can to organize structures in society, whether it's the NHS in England, or it's a tax system, or it's a law, a constitutional system that protects your rights and your property, and whatever your perspective it is, they break down. You see, communism, it wasn't communism that killed so many people. It was greed. It was power-hungry people. It was thieves that broke in and stole. And that's going to happen in any system, because in the closed system of our world, thieves break in and steal. Because people have this bent. this entropy to not achieve and become something more, but to fall apart. There aren't many stories of people who went from strength to strength. Most stories are such that there's some pinnacle of character or altruism or philanthropy, but it all falls apart in relationships. In the end, most people in some way become thieves. They become takers. They become selfish. And if we stay in this closed system, even the societal system that we're in, it's going to fall apart. We're going to eat up all our resources. We're going to diminish and diminish. The sun will burn out. The earth will run out of its resources. Society will eat itself up. And like the lemmings and rats in most of the biological simulation games that you might play, we're going to peak out in population, because in a closed system, you can't get what you didn't put in. I want to encourage you to consider the open system. The open system is a system where God exists, that God is a miraculous source of power and life that is unending. And in the realm where he exists and invites us to exist with him, there is no Newtonian second law. Entropy doesn't exist because he is an eternal source of life, light, and power. And he invites us, according to Jesus, to store our treasure in his realm, in his kingdom, in his dimension. It's something to think about. Are you a parasite? Or is your power and life stored up in heaven? I hope it is.